I would have to say the thing that has most strongly and greatly influenced my creative life is my mother, because she is the one who first saw my potential as an artist. And so it may or may not have started with me drawing Ernie and Bert in marker on the closet door, but she was an educator when I was growing up. And so she would bring colored paper and crayons and things like that for me to draw on. And she also uh, encouraged me to color and things like that. Sometimes she would color with me the things that I was drawing, or she would get me coloring books and things like that. And then as I got older, she enrolled me in the Art Students League because my teachers were really getting fed up in middle school with my tendency to draw on my homework and on my notes and on the desk and on my jeans and on everything. So that was where I first began to get a really formal education in terms of composition and spatial dynamics of objects and human anatomy, shading and things like that. And she encouraged me to enter my work in the art shows they had there, and we'd talk with my teachers. And she got me my first art table, which, if you've ever seen an art table, is an incredibly cumbersome thing for one person to haul from an art store all the way back to their apartment. So, even though, of course, we've kind of butted heads on this or that over the years, I can definitely say that my mother has been the strongest influence because she's the one who saw it first, and she's the one who tried to nurture it, almost like a little plant.
Mm, wow, you're so lucky.
Yes, she didn't try to kind of crush that or, um, push me away towards other things. Of course, I think at times maybe she had her own ideas of how I would pursue art or what direction I would go in. Um, she's from the West Indies, and so in a lot of respects, they still have a set idea of kind of like what you're supposed to be as a grown up. You're supposed to have the job, and you're supposed to have this, the kind of stability and a trade, and have your place where you live and your car and things like that. So I think when at times she noticed me drifting or trying to find my own path, these were instances where things maybe got a little complicated because I kind of wanted to figure it out for myself. And a lot of times I don't think she understood, what it was I was trying to do. And then in terms of work I've had over the past, like if I took a job doing, say, video games for the computer or something like that. Maybe if she didn't understand exactly what it was I was doing as far as like animating characters and things like that, it was hard for her to be supportive in that respect. But I think now she sees, that she kind of has to give me room a little more. So it's definitely a lot better in that respect. And of course, she's still very supportive and proud of what I do.
Did she have fear about you going into your art form as a profession?
I'm not really sure. There were times when, we would be looking at a show or through a magazine, and she'd say, "I always thought you would become, an artist, and have your shows in galleries." And since then, have had my shows in galleries, my art in galleries and things like that. But I never really understood exactly what her vision was as far as that's concerned. I think in certain respects it might have been a very classical kind of thing, or doing the figure, or doing portraits maybe, or things like that. So when I was doing comics, which my father introduced me to, it was like comics, you're never going to be able to make a living off of that. But I don't necessarily know if I need to. It's something that I have to do, and doing stories for children of color specifically, especially girls, is something that really means a lot to me. So, the other day I was at home and I was getting ready to actually start drawing after work, and I was tired. And I was like, why am I doing this? And it was just, there was no questioning it. It was I was asking myself that even as I was getting ready to start drawing. It was just something that I absolutely have to do. I can't, to not do it actually, I think would be to bring quite a bit of discomfort onto myself in a way, emotionally, not physically. One of the things that's great about working on the iPad, and one of the things that's been so freeing for me, is that there are a lot of times in the past where I would draw something in pencil and then I would ink it and then I would just kind of leave it because I'd be so afraid of messing it up. So, I just have these folders full of these inked pieces and I would never push it any further than that. And what's nice about the app I'm using is, it supports layers, and so there's blend modes and there's all these different things you can do. I think once I start going on a piece, it really doesn't matter. It just kind of has an energy that takes on a life of its own almost, and the characters even on the page take on a life of their own. When I'm thinking about drawing them before I start, I don't think about where they're going to be looking or their expressions necessarily. It just kind of happens. It's almost like a voice that's just like, do this, and I say, oh, okay, and I do it, and then everything kind of comes together. It's a strange sort of choreography that is just spontaneously occurring at the same time that I'm drawing a piece. There's times when in the opposite of that, there's times where it's very almost mule-like, and it just sits there and it doesn't want to move, and I don't want to draw. And I worry that like something's going on, and I kind of search myself to see what's happening. But then after that, I don't question it. Some people say you should just draw something every day. Draw anyway, even if you don't feel like it. But I don't push it. And so when I finally have the urge to draw, especially after it's been a little while, it feels really good. It's like everything else just falls away. Things that are going on in my personal life or work, things I worry about, things I, worrying about, like, my mom and how she's doing or how I'm doing, health, money, the future of the country, whatever else, just a blatant kind of racist things that I see going on more and more and more all the time. It all just, it's like somebody in the room just tells all those people to shut up, and it gets very quiet. And I still might have the TV on and things like that, but I become very pulled into the world, and that's something that has been like that ever since I was a kid. Even as a kid, when things would bother me, I would, or someone would tease me or something else was going on, I felt like diving into the worlds and things that I was creating on paper was like almost a sort of a special place that only I could go and nobody else could touch it, and no one could disturb it, and I have complete control over this thing. So in that respect, it's very reassuring too. Even if it comes out looking in a way that you didn't really want it to, it's my own, special creation, and it's an energy that I feel like I have control over in terms of holding the pencil, and then at times it's an energy that feels like it's controlling me. So it's a wonderful feeling. One time a couple of weeks ago, I was in a restaurant waiting for a takeout order, and I was playing this video game. And this woman's like, "Are you playing that video game? Is that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "But that's for kids." And the thing is that if I had my druthers, I guess, there's a certain simplicity, even though maybe it didn't feel like that at the time. There's a certain kind of nostalgia that I have for that time of being a kid, of going outside, of playing. A lot of people, as they get older, they don't play anymore. They get very serious, and they want to only look at kind of adult-oriented things. And I guess it's my childlike sense of wonder, underneath the very thick layer of sarcasm, is still very much there. And I don't ever want to let go of it. So creating that kind of stuff for kids, for me, is very therapeutic in that sense, because it's recreating all the things that I would like to see. I know I would like to see as a kid, and the adventures and the color and the creatures and all this stuff. It's a something that I am what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not ashamed of it or embarrassed of it. It's something that I think is just really awesome, and I don't, fortunately, I'm very good about keeping a small circle of people around me who also kind of either think in a similar way or appreciate that. And so I never really find myself around people who give me a hard time about or say, "What are you doing kid stuff for? That's so silly." Um, no, it's not. It's very important. It's very important to kids, and it's very important to me because in that respect, I get to play. I'm on the subway drawing, and I say, "Oh, I'm gonna make that a giant snapping flower." And it's so wonderful way to escape from the more adulting aspects of my life. If not for just a little bit before I have to go to work and kind of deal with all that other stuff. What's important about it is that I think that kids need to see themselves mirrored in stories that tell them that they matter, particularly children of color, and particularly in the state that things are in presently. It's almost like, the Death Eaters and Slytherin are all up in the White House to wax Harry Potter-esque. I think that kids need to be told, but especially black girls and black boys need to be told that they are beautiful, that they are smart, that they can do what they want, that they have potential, that they can have adventures too, that they can create their own worlds, that they can create characters, that they don't have to wait for someone to do that for them, that they can give themselves permission to explore the universe of their mind, which is vast and never-ending. And I think that that's very powerful because it's a weapon against the people who would say you are mediocre or that you don't matter or that you will always be this or you will never be anything. And, there are a lot of people out there that are carrying that message with them. There are people telling children that they can't go where they can't be where other people are. They're calling, people will call the cops on you for just standing there and selling water in front of your house. So, I guess it's my way of saying, you belong wherever you are. And, even in a world like this one, you have to kind of capture the light that's around you, because there is kind of goodness around you, even though it doesn't seem like it. And even when it doesn't seem like it, you can create your own light. You can take your light and you can, watch it burn, and you can draw, and you can take yourself to places that don't exist, and have adventures. And I think that in turn kind of extends itself to the outside world. It tells a kid, I can do these things. I can travel. I can learn about this, or I can learn about that. I can achieve great things. I think that all starts in the imagination, and simply kind of planting the seed of saying you can, and that you are amazing, and all of those good things that I think people need to hear but often don't, or maybe they pay more attention to the negative things because it seems like there's so much more of it out there. Sometime before I actually started doing comics, I had a job at Milestone Comics. And Milestone Comics was a company that was, their stuff was being published by DC. And it was exclusively characters of color, Asian, black, Indian, like all these different kinds of characters. And it was the first time that I had ever seen anything like that. And so I knew that they were looking for a colorist. And at that time I had graduated from college, and I was working in a retail store actually right where the Prada store is now. I was working at the Guggenheim gift shop. And I quit my job and I went and I started hitting them up for work. I didn't give any notice or anything, and I quickly put a portfolio together. And that was the first time I ever saw a setup like that. I was working under a guy named Jason Scott Jones, and he was showing me how they colored, because they colored everything by hand. And it was seeing these incredible stories that were starring all these people of all these different ethnicities and all these different situations, and very kind of tangible, real life, kind of relatable situations. Being a single mom and being a superhero and things like this. And I was fascinated by that. And it really, I think, even though things ultimately didn't pan out because they ended up shutting their doors for production at that time, I think it kind of lit an ember that kind of was smoldering for a while. And even though I ultimately ended up going back to retail, it was something that never quite left me. And it stayed with me for years until I don't think I could resist the calling of it anymore. And I didn't want to look back years down the line and imagine that I never tried and never actually gave it a shot. And I only allowed my feelings of doubt and things like that to keep me from actually attempting to do comic storytelling.
And just as an aside, how many years have you been doing comic storytelling?
Officially, about 8. I think the thing, particularly in terms of my creating comics, is that usually the way I start out, I'll start out with a very loose script, and then I'll create thumbnails based on that, and then I'll sketch out my pages based on that, and it's this whole kind of recursive process. And I find a lot of times the things that's been surprising me the most lately is that as I'm penciling the pages, something in me will just be like, stop, this is not a good flow. You need to add in another page between the last page and this page to kind of have the story flow better, or you should end this page with this particular image or scene, so it'll make people want to change, turn the page to see what else happens. And a lot of that is not conscious at all. It's just something that kind of happens. And even though I'm like, okay, I'll do another page, ultimately it makes it much better. And then I find that when I'm at the end of penciling a page, I never have to ask myself if I'm done, because there's a part of me that's like, this is perfect, ink it, and so on and so forth. So it's a weird thing, but I kind of love it. And the more I draw, I think the louder it is, like the more in sync we are with each other. We just work very well. There's that part that's like telling me, or telling me to get rid of this or to add something, and then the part of me that's actually executing it. It's almost like two distinct halves that kind of work as a whole. It's interesting. One time I had my art in a gallery show, and it was the opening, and it was all about women in comics. And so I had pages from my first comic up there and some other art. And this guy came up and he kind of looked at my stuff for a second, and he said, well, and I said, he said, well, what about her? What about, what's so special about her? And, it's interesting. I had to really fight the urge to just kind of tell him to go F off, because I think that the people that I'm speaking to through my art will see what it is I'm doing. In the meantime, I told him that she was a one-of-a-kind, awesome superhero that doesn't look like a superhero, and she goes on adventures, and she doesn't have superpowers, but she uses her wits and her ability to make friends and her ability to think fast and to think creatively to navigate this different world that she finds herself in. And he kind of went, and he went on to the next thing. And I think I went and got more wine. But, you know, I've never been good at coming up with responses to stuff like that. So I often will just be like, well, you know, you either see it or you don't. Like, if you have to ask, then you're probably not who I'm kind of, you know, putting my stuff out to.
Right, right. If the question is there, you know, we're not on the same train tracks anymore.
Right, we're not on the same train track. You know, and then there have been people like who every so often to say, well, you know, what do you want to do with this? And I'm not entirely sure about that either. I just feel like that same kind of voice that drives me to create will hopefully tell me which direction to put my sail in. But yeah, typically no. I just kind of keep moving forward. But I haven't really had anyone that's been like outright kind of doubtful or told me to like give up or anything like that. So I've been very fortunate. And once again, I try to, you know, keep really positive people and creative people around myself. So we all kind of, you know, fuel each other's fire. I think there was like a short piece that Will Smith had posted on Facebook, and he was talking about how you have to have friends and people around you who fuel your fire. They don't try to put your fire out. So, yeah,